This webinar will be 90 minutes. You've entered this meeting in mute. We ask that you remain on.
Awesome.
We ask that you remain on mute for the duration of the meeting unless you are speaking. Cheryl, who's turning the slides?
Me, sorry about that.
Okay. You have two views for this meeting, gallery view and speaker view. Speaker view is recommended during presentations, and gallery view is best when the presenters are not sharing. Maybe I should skip that one. We are encouraging you to ask questions, and we will be monitoring the questions throughout. As questions, if I see several coming in of the same kind, I will ask Marsha at that point. We are recording this session. Now, before we get started, I'd like to recognize and thank PlusPass, who has generously supported today's session. Please welcome Shannon Swank, co-founder and chief marketing officer for PlusPass. Shannon.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Terry, and especially thanks to IBTTA for the opportunity to sponsor this session. We're really excited about this. Just wanted to take a few moments and give you some information about PlusPass. We are a payment provider in the toll industry. We help agencies capture those last 5 to 10% of users that are oftentimes more challenging to capture and more challenging to maintain. In particular, the cash-based, infrequent, transient users. We have two solutions. One is a toll tag, a toll transponder, cash reloadable distribution program. And then we have another one that is a phone application, license plate based reading solution. We today would like to show you a video on the application, the PlusPass app. We have some exciting news to announce. So we want to show you a little bit more about that.
Toll roads, they're everywhere these days. And with the traffic clogging our roads, it's no wonder that drivers are using them more and more. But while they're supposed to be fast and convenient, paying for them can be anything but. Introducing PlusPass, the easiest way to pay tolls using just your smartphone. No paper bills, no postage, no late fees. Simply download the PlusPass app, snap a picture of your license plate, set up your payment info, and PlusPass does the rest. You don't even have to have your phone with you when you pass through a toll. Your info will automatically be linked to your account. The toll and small convenience fee will be paid. You just app, snap, and drive. Need to add a new vehicle or payment method? No problem. Use the app to add as many as you need at any time. You can even add temporary vehicles and set an expiration date for when they'll be removed from your account. And all tolls and transactions are recorded in the app for easy reference at any time. It's simple, convenient, and saves time and money. So what are you waiting for? Download the PlusPass app now and put toll transactions in the palm of your hand.
So we have an exciting announcement. We just submitted a new app release to both app stores, the Google Play and the Apple app stores, so that users can now pre-fund their accounts using cash. So this is a really easy solution for agencies and users that want to use cash in an all electronic environment. So we're pretty excited about that. So I would encourage you to download the app. Go to pluspass.com or contact me directly if you'd like more information. And now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Marsha Clark. Marsha is an independent consultant who founded her own company in 2000. She's designed, developed, and delivered programs supporting leadership development, change management, strategic planning, performance management, team development, and executive coaching. She's been delivering specific leadership development programs for women for over 20 years. She's delivered programs to women from over 50 countries in all regions of the world. Prior to starting her own company, she worked at EDS for 21 years, where she advanced from secretary to corporate officer. We're pleased to have you with us today, Marsha. Please take yourself off mute, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Shannon, and I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this webinar series that you've been doing in this inaugural year. And I want to thank Terry and Wanda and Cheryl, along with Shannon, for making this happen. So thank you very much for the support that you've given. So when Wanda and I were talking about what we wanted to cover from a content perspective, looking at where we are and what we've been throughout this entire year, a lot of people are in transition. So whether it is I'm looking for opportunities within my own company, and in some cases with the clients that I work with, it's also been that I've found myself in need for looking outside of my organization. So I want to share a structure or a framework or a tool with you that you can use forevermore. So whether you're early in your career, and most of us are going to have several different roles in the time that we spend in our professional life, and this is a tool that allows you to organize your thoughts and your aspirations for where you might want your career to go. And so we sent out some material to you that I hope that you've downloaded, because we're going to do some work on this webinar. It's not just me being a talking head to you. It's going to be me asking you some questions and you completing some information that's useful to use, that you can use in order to make some decisions, whether they be imminent decisions or decisions that you might make over the next few years. And what we're going to do is we're going to combine not only career aspirations and career goals, but we want to also talk about how do I play to my strengths. So we're going to have an opportunity to bring that in as well. One of the things that the research has shown us now for many years is that when we get to spend at least 50% of our time doing things that we're really good at, so playing to our strengths, if you will, that we have an opportunity to be more engaged, more productive, and just happier about what we do. And so finding that role that enables us to showcase or highlight our talents and skills, our strengths, is a really important piece. So if you'll turn in the materials that you were sent to page 5, I'm a person who loves quotes. They're things that inspire me. And so I offer this one in that vein. This is from Viktor Frankl, who was a physician actually in the Auschwitz camps during the World War II. And he's one of my heroes, if you will, in thinking about our choices. And so between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And the reason that I chose this particular quote was when I've been doing this work now for a really long time. I have both men and women as my clients. And what I find is that when I ask a general question about where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years, for most men that I talk with and work with, they'll say a pretty specific answer. They'll say a job title, they'll say an industry, they'll even perhaps say a company. When I ask women that same question, I get more vague responses. So it's kind of well, that's a really good question. Or, my boss just asked me that question. And so it's easier to help someone when they give you information about where they want to go. And so that's the intentionality and the choice points that we want to make. We want to take on responsibilities or take on roles that enable us not only to play to our strengths, but that help us get to our eventual career aspirations. And so as we go through this, I hope there's going to be some things that bring you more clarity by using this framework or using this tool. So Cheryl, if you'll go to the next slide, then the one after that. So one of the first things I want to offer to you is that we need to be clear that when we're changing jobs, and that can be internally or externally, when we change jobs, we want to make sure that we're moving toward something and not away from something. You may have heard the old saying that says people join organizations or companies and they leave bosses or they leave cultures. And so when women find ourselves time to make a change, it's often to get away from something and it's gotten so bad that we just can't do it anymore. And then we go on to the next thing and it doesn't satisfy our needs or our career aspirations as well. So part of the clarity that I hope that you'll come away from today's session with is that I know what I want to move toward. Now, there'll be times when you're also moving with, if your organization gets merged or split off or divested or whatever it might be, then that's a different scenario. But moving away from something, usually we're just bringing whatever the issues were, they follow us. So we want to get really clear about moving towards something. So I want you to get ready now in your worksheet. I'm going to ask you some questions and I want you to jot down the answers that come to your mind. And towards the end of this webinar, we're going to put you into breakout groups. And these are some of the things that you're going to talk about with other people who are part of this program today. And so if you'll turn in your materials that were sent to you to page 10, I'm going to ask you some questions, give you some examples, give you some thoughts, and jot down your notes there. So Cheryl, if we can go to the first question. It is, what are the characteristics of the ideal role that you would like to have? And I want to say to you, again, depending on where you are in your career, you may have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 new jobs, different jobs, as you move through your career. And jobs change so much based on technology, based on all sorts of things. So it's less important and less valuable, in my opinion, to say I want a job title than it is to describe the characteristics of the role. So the characteristics are things like, I want to manage people. I want to work directly with customers. I want to have budget or P&L, profit and loss responsibility. I want to manage a budget so that I can understand revenue, expenses, profit, and so on. I may say that I want to work in an organization that's very local, or maybe I want to be part of something that's national or international, global, if you will. So what are those characteristics that you would like to that you would identify that would give you an opportunity to move into a role that better fits the path that you want to take? So if you will, jot down those characteristics, and once you've done this and you've gotten clearer about it, and there may be other things that come to you after our session today, think about the things that you've really enjoyed in the roles that you may have already had. I like working with a collegial team. I like working with processes. I'm a big person on quality. Those are the kinds of things that can help you come to the answer of where do you see yourself 3 to 5 years from now? You may not say, I want to be, the head of accounting or that sort of thing, but you might say, I want to be in a role that allows me to influence or set or guide the organization from a strategic standpoint. I want to be in a role, again, that allows me to manage people. So I can describe a role, and there may be several different positions that would meet your needs, but it's specific enough to help you, because when we're so vague about these kinds of things, it's difficult to say, well, who can I connect you to, or who can I introduce you to that would allow you to talk to someone about potential opportunities. So getting as specific as you can. So I'm going to give you some time to write down what are those characteristics of if I could define the best role possible for me, what would that look like? And then let's go to the second question. And the second question is, what are the characteristics of the ideal boss? Now, we all know that even if we go to work for one boss, we have no idea whether that's going to be the same boss next week, next month, next year, because people change roles fairly frequently, or organizations restructure and move people around and departments around and so on and so forth. But this idea about our boss, especially if we move into a new role, the boss is the person who's going to help set the first impressions about me. As you think about moving into a role, who the boss is going to be matters. And when you think about the best bosses you've ever had, what were those characteristics? Were they bosses that were good coaches and mentors? Were they bosses who were accessible and were willing to talk to you about how to be better in your role, giving you feedback, providing developmental opportunities, assigning you to high visibility kinds of projects so that you could showcase your talents and skills and abilities? Do you want a boss who's particularly good at an area that you may want to grow in? Maybe they're really good with customers, or they have great financial acumen. Maybe they have, they're really good at influencing others. And that's something that you want to work on. And the fact that we're going to have many bosses over the years, this is an opportunity to say, where are some areas that I want to grow and develop? And can this particular boss help me? So again, on your worksheet, what are some of the characteristics of the ideal boss? Maybe I want a thought partner. Maybe I want someone who tells me what they want and lets me be creative in how I go about accomplishing it. Maybe I want a boss that I make sure they give me good requirements, or they give me good guidance so that I don't go off and do a lot of work, bring it back to the boss, and they say, that's not what I wanted. There's nothing more frustrating than that. So can we describe a boss that's going to help us grow, learn, and develop, and allow us to do our best work? So what are those characteristics? And then our next question, question number 3, is, what are the characteristics of the ideal environment? And let me tell you what I mean by that. If I'm working with people in general, one of the first questions I say, do you want to work in a for-profit or a not-for-profit? Do you want to work in a public or a private? Government? Do you want to work in healthcare, education, manufacturing? What broad descriptions of where you want to work? So that's one way of thinking about it. Do I want to work in a small, a medium, or a large organization? Some people are really good at knowing how to navigate big organizations, and they like all that entails. Others would much rather work in a small team, a small company where I know everybody, where, we're all in it together and it's almost got a family, the positive parts of the family feel to it. And so when you think about the ideal environment for you, what does that look like? And then another way to think about it is, do I want to work in an organization that's stable? Do I want one that's in a growth mode, so that there are going to be increased opportunities for me to continue to broaden my scope of responsibility? And then what kind of culture do you like working in? Do you like working in a culture where you know that the organization is committed to doing development of its people? Whether that's giving funds or allocating funds for you to go to training or conferences, or whether it has a strong internal training program of its own. Does it encourage you to be part of organizations like Women in Tolling and give you the time and the funds to support you in that? Do I want an organization that promotes from within, or are they going to be lots of organizations go outside and want the talent on day one versus growing the talent within the organization? So what do you want in the way of organization size, type, culture, and support of you? What would you say, and how would you describe that? And make a few notes about that in your worksheet. And I hope by now what you're seeing is that what I'm trying to do is get all those thoughts that might be swirling around in our brains. We're trying to get them down on paper so that we can see them in some coherent or organized way. So now let's go to question number 4. And question number 4, in my opinion, is the hardest question to answer. This is, what is my unique offering? And this is where in just a moment, when we talk a bit more about your strengths, that they have to come into play. If you're familiar at all with StrengthsFinder, and I'm going to give a little bit of a preempt here, if you're familiar at all with that, you know that there is no one profile that describes success. So what the Gallup organization, and they're one of the largest survey and polling organizations, and they have huge databases from which to draw the inferences and the themes and patterns. And what they say is there's no one profile of success, that each of us, that the best thing that we can do is play to our strengths. And that's a key component in what's going to make us successful. So when you think about your unique offering, strengths are certainly a part of it. And rarely is it one thing. It's usually some combination that might be different from others that might be applying and wanting the same kinds of roles that you do. So I want you to think about this in terms of, if I were a recruiter and I were looking at your resume or your bio, your CV, what would I see? What's the very first thing on the top of the page that I would see about you? And what are you going to say about yourself in that regard? That as a recruiter, I would say, I'm going to put this person's resume in the pursue further stack versus the not interested stack. So you can think about yourself as what differentiates me. And again, it's often a combination of things. So I'll give you my own example to maybe help you out. So and this is not me selling myself as a potential employee, but selling myself as a potential provider, and there's similarities in those two as well. So when I think about myself, I had corporate experience, and I had it on both the support side as well as the line side. So in my support side, I worked in all areas of HR, training, diversity, recruiting, talent acquisition, performance management, compensation. I also worked on the line side, where I was an account executive for our largest financial services account, and then was also president of our healthcare business unit. So I had global responsibilities in the healthcare organization. I was responsible for $1 billion in revenue, 40 clients around the world. And so I knew both sides of an organization, creating support tools and capabilities, as well as then managing clients and financials and creating products and selling and all of those things. That in and of itself is somewhat unusual. And then I went back and got my Master's of Science in Organization Development in my late 40s. And that was giving me then the academic rigor and discipline and research, so that as I look at the work that I do now, which is around team performance, executive development, leadership development, performance management, talent management, all of those things come together. And so I have both the academic research side as well as the anecdotal side, the practical work experience side. So people who do what I do, that's a fairly unusual combination that I'm able to bring. And so if you think about that, how does that help the client, whoever it is that I'm serving? Well, it helps me from the standpoint of when someone is talking to me about how hard their job is, I have appreciation for that. I have some empathy for that, because I've sat in a chair similar to what their chair is, and I don't judge them. I don't criticize them. I don't blame them for things. And yet at the same time, I often call it, they can't blow smoke up my skirt, which means they can't tell me things that I won't call them on it, right? I hear what you're saying, but there's ways that we can work on that, right? So it's the combination of that, empathy, compassion, and understanding, as well as, the challenging part in a supportive way. So my experiences have given me an opportunity to see that. And another aspect that I often talk about is the growth. So when Shannon introduced me, you heard her say, I started at EDS. I spent 21 years there. I started as a secretary in 1978. And at that time, women were told that we could be anything that we wanted to be. But when you looked around, we were teachers, secretaries, nurses, that sort of thing. And so I started as a secretary. And 21 years later, I left as a corporate officer of a Fortune 50 company. So I saw the organization at, sort of every rung of the ladder, if you will. So what are your experiences that you can bring to an organization or to a role or to a department? And again, this isn't just if you're looking outside. Please don't take that message. This is when you're looking inside. Just it's in my opinion, more useful there because I know more about the organization and what's available to me. So what are your unique offerings that you can bring to the table that make you most qualified for the roles that you aspire to have? And the other thing that you'll notice that I say there is that when you're talking about your unique offering, you want to talk about it in terms that benefit the organization and the customers that the organization serves. So putting that at the front end of your unique offering is a way that shows that you understand that it's not just about you, it's about serving the organization or the larger good. So let's go to question 5 now. And this is, I often refer to this as, it's almost like the administrivia, if you will, the administrative trivial stuff that we have to work on, but it's really important. And so if you look at some of these questions on your worksheet, is there a certain salary that you're looking for? And I want to say something about that. This is often tied to whether I'm moving away from something or whether I'm moving towards something. And the one thing that I teach women around the world is know your market value. And the way that you know your market value, whether it is ranges that are, visibly published, what the value that your company places on the role that you have. And there are places you can go out, surveys that you can look at, recruiters right now. The market is changing dramatically right now because of what we've gone through in 2020. And what I'm finding is that data that was even gathered in 2019 is no longer valid in 2020. So recognizing what your market value is a little bit harder, but there's a book called Get Paid What You're Worth. And it's a great resource that I encourage everyone to have in their library because it helps you think about how to determine that market value. And then if you're in an organization that pays bonuses, whether it's a dollar amount or a percentage, or, if you do choose to go into an organization that also offers some sort of equity position, and I know that may not apply to what you're looking at right now, but you never know what your future may bring. And so what are those desires and perhaps even requirements that you want? And then are you willing to relocate? And if so, do you have any limitations on that? Are you willing to travel with your role? If so, is it 25% of the time, 50% of the time? Are you willing to travel 100% of the time? And are there any other requirements that you have? Do you want to, I know we've all been working from home here this last several months, but when things get back to normal, whatever that normal might look like, do you want to negotiate that you can work from home 2 days a week or, 1 day a week or whatever it might be? So what are those things that you want to get really clear about on the front end of any job opportunity that you might have? These are going to be the kinds of questions you'll be asked, and you want to have answers for them. I know, again, I'll go back to what I've learned about working with women is as long as we do okay, money is often not our most, it's not our primary motivator. It's one that what we're really looking for is we want to have a quality of life that enables us to take good care of our family, have some financial security, send our kids to good schools or whatever it might be. And yet it's a part of why women make 80 cents on the dollar is that we accept what's given to us and don't always look at what our market value really is. So it's an important piece for us to think about and be clear about. Now, the next thing I want to talk about with you, and this goes to the next steps. And if you look in your workbook, you're going to see a template for a spreadsheet. And here's what I want to share with you about that. Since I've been using this tool for, I'm going to tell you, about 20 years, I have found in that time period that when people go through this exercise of answering these 5 questions that I've just shared with you, and I say, okay, the next step for you is to go put those in column 1 on that spreadsheet. And then the second step is look at your current role and how well does your current role match your ideal characteristics. And let me tell you what happens. About 50% of the time, people say to me, you know what, my current role matches about 80% of my requirements. And maybe I've been so focused on the 20% that it doesn't match that I've forgotten to appreciate the 80% that it does. And I'm not kidding, that happens about half the time. And you can say, well, that was a wasted exercise. Or what people tell me when they do this is, I can go to work tomorrow and feel a whole lot better about the job I have and the boss I have and the people that I work with and the responsibility that I have. And so it's a different way I'm thinking about my role in a more positive, optimistic, abundant way rather than what it's not. And remember, if I get to spend about 50% of my time doing things that I'm good at and that I like, I'm going to be happier, more productive, and more engaged. Now, the other 50% say, well, no wonder I'm miserable. No wonder I dread getting up every single morning and going into the office. It doesn't meet half of my requirements. And so that's when you know that it's time to either think about, can I do something to enrich my job? Do I need to have a conversation about next career opportunity with my boss? Do I need to start talking with people throughout the organization to understand if there's another role that might be a better fit for me, my strengths, my skills, my talents? And that's where the subsequent columns come into play. So you go talk to a boss in another department and you learn about that and you kind of look at the role that they can offer to you. And you say, well, how good a match is that? And you'll notice that back in each of the questions that I asked you to fill out on your worksheet, there are even some interview questions that I would encourage you to ask as you're pursuing additional opportunities. And this is all about the intentionality of managing your career. So you can say you can ask the question about, well, you know, how much influence do you feel like, if you're talking to your potential new boss, how much influence do you feel like you have in the organization? How do you wield that influence? You know, you can certainly get all the characteristics of the job specifically and ask about that. You can even, you know, ask, you know, how would you describe our culture? Is it a collegial culture? Is it a siloed culture? Is it a development culture? And those are things that you want to probe on to make sure that you're getting what you want. That's the intentionality part of this. So let me stop now and ask if anybody's got any questions. Cheryl, I don't know if you and Terry have been monitoring any chats that have been coming in. So any questions that you have regarding anything that I've shared with you thus far. This is you putting together a career next step plan for yourself.
We've not received any questions thus far, Marsha.
All right. Does anyone out there, and maybe you've spent time trying to get your thoughts down on paper, do any questions come to mind for you as you think about this?
Silent group.
All right. Well, I want to make sure that you feel good about what you've been able to describe and write down maybe from your head to the paper, if you will. If questions do come up, please be sure to, put them in the chat room and we'll be happy to answer those for you. So the next thing we're going to talk about is strengths. And so the idea of, getting to, okay, so we've already talked about that, Cheryl, if we can go to playing to my strengths. So the information I'm going to share with you here is from the Gallup organization, and then Donald Clifton took what the Gallup organization had done. And a lot of organizations have done Strengths Finder. And so from that standpoint, we want to make sure that you're looking at opportunities that are in fact going to play to your strengths. So if you'll look in your workbook on page 14, one of the things that we asked you to do in preparation for today's session was to bring your Strengths Finder, find that material if you've done it before, or if you haven't done Strengths Finder, there were 4 pages listed in here of competencies or attributes or strengths that you could choose from to say, which ones of these best describe me? And so on the top of page 14, and even though they're numbered strength 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there are 34 of these strengths, and there's not a strength, there's not necessarily an order that you need to worry about. If you just get your 5 strengths and you list them there. And then what you'll also notice is on page 15, 16, 17, and 18, you'll see colors. You'll see the blue, the green, the yellow, and the red. And the way that the strengths have been organized or categorized to give us a grouping of what kind of label you want to put on these kinds of strengths, you'll see that the blue strengths are about relating. So being in relationship, interpersonal aspect in that regard. The green are about influencing. And we know that many of us like to be in a position to be able to influence decisions or outcomes or strategies. And then the yellow is in the thinking part. So that's more of the internal, analytical, logical processing piece. And then the red is in execution. So how do we make it happen? How do we put plans together? How do we go administer the decisions, the choices, the direction, the strategy, the guidance that we may have received? And so as you look at your 5 strengths, take a minute and put which ones are the ones that fall into the blue category, the green category, the yellow, or the red. So just jot down, I'm going to give you a minute to do that, to find all of those. So there was one question about, do we need 5 per category? No, you just need 5, period. And there may be 2 in the blue, 2 in the red, 1 in the yellow. They could all be in the blue category. So it doesn't matter. It's just looking at your top 5.
And Marsha, did you see the one from Sharon?
No, I did not. So tell me.
Just above that, could you provide more information on the Strengths Finder?
Yeah, so the Strengths Finder, I will tell you, there's been several books written. That First Break All the Rules was the first one. Then there was one that was written called Strengths Finder 2.0. That was actually the name of the book. And I find the second book to be really valuable. So what they did was a study that looked at millions, I'm not kidding, millions of people who, and they were trying to create a profile for success. And what they found is that the 34 strengths that are listed on those 4 pages that are in your workbook, that those were the themes and patterns that emerged but it could be any combination of them, that it was more about you being the best you or the most authentic you. And I will tell you that I have found that to be anecdotally true as well, that when I try to conform to someone else's definition of success, I don't get to be me. I don't get to be my best me and contribute my best thinking and my best work. So the idea about Strengths Finders is saying that when I know my combination, my top 5, and there are reports where you can get all 34 of them, but the typical focus is on those top 5. It lets me know then how I can bring these to my job, to my role, to my company, to my client, customers, whatever it may be. And that's when I'm at my best, and that's what yields, again, more engagement, more productivity, and greater happiness and satisfaction. So I hope that answers the question. If not, let me know. Again, you can go out, and it's a very inexpensive thing where you can do an online assessment to find your top 5 strengths if you've not done that. So what I want you to do now is think about the career transition worksheet that you have. Now take your strengths and put them back on the page where you talked about unique offerings. What is your unique value? What makes you you? And how do you want to speak about that? So just jot those down, and as you describe what you think differentiates you possibly from other people that may be applying for similar jobs, that's a part of the unique you. And then what I want you to do is go over to page 19 in your workbook or in the materials that were sent to you. And I have 2 questions for you there that are very targeted and specific as it relates to using your strengths, talking about your strengths, describing your strengths. The first one is, how have you previously used your strengths, or how are you currently using your strengths in your day-to-day responsibilities? So it could be on a process for which you're responsible. It could be a project that you may be working on or leading. The reason that I put previously used as well as currently used, what I hear often from my clients is that if I have a relatively new boss who they may know what I'm doing right now, but they may not have knowledge about what my experiences have been from previous roles that I've had. So you want to make sure that your bosses know the complete description of the kinds of skills and talents and strengths that you bring to the table. So what are some examples of how you use your strengths in your current role, or perhaps in previous roles where you've been really satisfied and feeling good about what you're able to do? So let me give you a minute to do that. I want to make sure that I'm giving you enough time, because I know there's a lot of information coming at you right now. And if you're not familiar with all of it, you've got to read through and see what it means and what it represents. So I hope you're not uncomfortable with the silence, but I think it's good to let you work in that regard. I agree, Shannon. It is thought-provoking and it's hard. These are not easy questions from the standpoint of You know, it's part of it is why we say we're vague when we're asked about what we want to do, because we haven't given the thought that this really deserves in order to be intentional. And then the second question on page 19 is, what examples can you give for how you've used your strengths in a very successful way? And the thinking in terms of how you would answer this question in an interview. And I see one other comment that when you go through and you say, well, I have no strengths in the yellow box or the green box or the blue box, I want to tell you that's the norm. The norm is that the majority have strengths in 2 boxes, and it's very unusual to have a strength in each one of them. So I just want to say that if you're finding that I don't have any blue, or I don't have any green, or I don't have any yellow, that's normal. That's very normal. That you're welcome to the, to the human race. So how would you describe how you've used your strengths that has yielded good results? And again, think about it in terms of my organization as well as the customers that we might serve. How has it benefited there as well as me? I've noticed that when I get to work in areas that support me in these ways, I'm much more successful and deliver greater value to the organization and to our customers. So I want to offer an example for those of you, whether you're really clear about this or thinking about this in terms of how you look at a role that's really good for you. So I'll tell you what my top 5 strengths are. My number 1 is relator. And that's when we are good at interpersonal one-on-one. So I use this in all my coaching work. My relator really plays to my strengths when I'm talking one-on-one with a person about them, getting to know them, how to help them, hearing their challenges, and so on and so forth. My second is strategic. And the work that I do as a consultant, as a coach, as a facilitator is to help people think through a more strategic way to do almost everything, right? We can get so caught up in some small, sort of the microscope aspect of it that we lose sight of the bigger picture, the macro, the telescope aspect of it. So strategically, what are you trying to accomplish? Strategically, what are the tools that you can use? So that strategic part, that strength plays into that. The third is learner. And I see myself, you can tell if I worked at EDS 21 years and I've had my business for 20, I'm old. So I'm 68 years old and have lived a few things along the way. And yet, going back and getting my master's when I was 47, and I'm a lifelong learner. I learn things all the time. I learn things from my grandkids. I learn things from my clients. I learn things from, I'm a voracious reader, and I'm always looking for a new perspective, a new insight, a new, well, look at that. And so being able to do that, and what I get to do in teaching and learning and facilitating and consulting is learning all the time. And then the fourth one is belief. And my belief is that women are valuable and that we need to be valued and that we need to determine and define success on our own terms. And so the work that I do, even though I work across all kinds of organizations and with men and women both, my signature offering, if you will, is in supporting women and helping women to achieve and to be their best selves based on their own terms, not on, again, conforming to what someone else thinks about who we are and what we should be. And then the last one is woo, and that means winning others over. And whereas relator is one-to-one, woo is one-to-many. So when I get to work in situations like today, where I'm talking with, a multitude of people, when I think about the classes that I teach and the work that I'm doing in the front of the room, so to speak, that's my one-to-many that I get to also offer to the world. So, I am doing what I'm doing before I ever took StrengthsFinder. And people ask me all the time, well, you have so much energy about what you're doing. And they ask me how, and I say, it's because I love what I do. You may have heard the old adage of, when you love what you do, you never go to work, right? So I still love getting up every single day and doing the kind of work that I do. And that's when you're playing to your strengths, because it does give you that energy, and it gives you have passion about it. And it shows most of the time as in every interaction that we have throughout the day. So hopefully that helps you think about in terms of ways in which we use our strengths in our day-to-day responsibilities, or whatever role we may be playing or hope to play in an organization. So
we have a question for those who are further along in the careers. How can they take their strengths and help others?
Yeah, well, of course, it depends on what the strengths are. But, if I have strengths in the relating, then it's sitting down and having conversations and making sure that I know what the person wants who's on the other side of the conversation, and that I'm providing, whether it be mentoring or experiences, or can introduce them to people who can help them in achieving what their career guidance is. Maybe if I'm in the thinking category, I want to help them think through and be a thought partner with them and say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? If I'm in the influencing, I can influence and perhaps get that person assigned to high visibility projects if that's something that's going to help them advance their careers. So those are the ways in which I can use my strengths to help another. And I just want to say thank you to the person who asked that question, because I think it's important that we pay it forward, if you will, in providing that kind of support. One of my mantras, if you will, is women supporting women in particular, that we're able to help bring other people along and using our strengths to that degree. And I do want to say too, there's a lot of research that has been done that says we want to be good at all 34, right? So I want to be, I've got to be good at everything, superwoman, as it often shows up. And the answer is no, we don't. Think about it in these terms, that if you are going from 0 to 10, 0 means I've never developed this, and 10 means I'm really good at it. If it's a natural strength of mine, which this StrengthsFinder, assessment can help us figure out, I can go from 0 to 10 without a lot of energy. If it's a non-strength, if you will, I can go from 0 to 5 and I'm really tired. It takes a lot more effort on my part to work in my non-strengths. So the key is making sure that you have a team that represents all the strengths that are going to serve you well for your function or your department, but I don't have to have them all in me. I don't have to be good at everything. And this is where I often say, give yourself grace and give others grace, but we want to know what each other's strengths are so that we can pull people in at a time when those strengths are exactly what are going to help us get to what we're trying to accomplish. I hope that answered that question. And you can probably tell by now I don't give short answers, so I hope the context part of that is useful to you. So any other questions, Terry or Cheryl, that we've seen come in? Okay.
No?
All right, so what we want to do now is put you in breakout groups. And we're going to put you in groups of 3 or 4. And would like for you to just share your information. And I think based on where we are, we can put them in groups for maybe about 10 to 12 minutes in groups of 3 or 4 and just share information. And I want to encourage you to support one another in that and ask questions that you think would help the person who's sharing their information get ever clearer on what that really looks like or what that means. And what I will offer to you is that clarifying questions start with what and how. So what would that look like? What kind of scope of responsibility would a role like that have? How would you go about determining next steps to find that right one? So that's the kind of probing or clarifying questions that we would want you to use to support one another in all of that. So Cheryl, I think you're going to be in charge of putting people in breakout rooms, and then we'll give you like a 1-minute warning before we're going to come back. And if questions come up along the way, jot those down and we'll have an opportunity to answer questions when we get back together. So I hope you found that to be a useful exercise that gave you even greater clarity, because with the greater clarity, you can then have the greater intentionality. But if someone is willing, I'd love to just hear, what was it like to go through this process? And if you can unmute yourself, I'd love for you to share it with the group. And we're amongst friends here. And I was saying, for those of you who may have heard or maybe hadn't come back yet, we learn in relationship with each other. And so women tend to learn about from hearing other people's stories and recognizing perhaps that we're not the only ones that are feeling the way we're feeling or struggling with the things we might be struggling with. And so is there anyone who would be willing to give me some thoughts or feedback? I'd love to hear from a couple of you about what the process was like to go through and fill out the worksheet, think about your strengths, and then have the conversation.
And I'll see you if you unmute yourself. Shannon, Susan. Few people I see right away that would
I'll
make
go.
you feel okay.
I mean, we chatted a little bit about just even going through this process and the day and the time that you do it, and the fact that during COVID right now makes it even more challenging, because right now I feel like my only strength is holding it together while I'm at home with the kids. And just the day, I mean, I gave my presentation and kind of felt like I didn't do my best and just felt off this morning. So now I feel like I have no strengths. So that was a little challenging to get through this. It really is thought provoking. And, you know, I have to admit, I was planning to do, go through the workbook this weekend and didn't quite get through it. And so then this morning it was like, what are your strengths? I'm like, I don't know. I made coffee.
Yeah. Well, so Shannon, let me offer something in the context of what you just described. So I just did a white paper, and if you're interested in it, you can go out to my LinkedIn page and find it. Here's what I'm finding, because this year is like no other. I mean, I've lived these 68 years and I've never been through anything, because the convergence of COVID and racial unrest and an election, a volatile election, and then, like you say, I got to deal with the kids here at home and do my job and all those things, then giving yourself grace and giving others grace. So what I have found, and what the paper talks about just in brief, physical fatigue, mental fatigue, emotional fatigue, compassion fatigue. And this I'm hearing about from like my clients in the healthcare world, where they're trying to be everything to their patients, and including family, because their families can't come see them. And they're just giving so much of themselves, and their heart is tired. I mean, I know that may sound a little silly, but their heart is tired. And all of that then leads to the psychological fatigue. So we're exhausted, we're overwhelmed. All of us are feeling inadequate on any given day. And the way that we respond to that, where I'm seeing it, you can either disappear. I have people who tell me they haven't talked to their boss in weeks and weeks and weeks, and I'm thinking that's unacceptable in normal circumstances. And when you're in times of crisis, you got to hear what's going on and what do I need to know, and stay informed. So disappearing is one response. A second response is getting angry. You know, these are the people that are getting thrown off planes and out of grocery stores and various things. And I'm also on the board of the the Collin County Advocacy Center, Children's Advocacy Center. And, you know, we know domestic abuse and all kinds of abuse goes up in times of crisis. And that's true now. That's a part of responding with anger. A third is the procrastination, right? We'll know more in 2 weeks. That's what the phrase I hear. It's hard for us to make decisions. And then there's the micromanagement. And this works both ways. Maybe I'm the one doing the micromanaging because it feels like that gives me some sense of control, right? If I make sure you're dotting every I and crossing every T. But then I have others who are saying, I want my boss or someone to look over my work again because I am distracted by all going on, and am I doing my best work? And then that distraction comes in with, I'm going to play video games or I'm going to binge something on Netflix all day because I don't really want to do my work because I'm struggling so badly. And then the last one is depression. And, you know, it's a real issue of the downward spiral of that. And so we've got to have an opportunity to, again, I say start with give ourselves grace, but then also talk with others to get it out of our system so that it's not building up. And I will tell you, on any given day, you might feel angry or you might want to procrastinate or be distracted or whatever. But if you find yourself being in that place all the time, it's time to reach out and talk to someone about it.
Sure.
I know that's a whole separate topical area, and yet I think it's one we're all living in. And when you're thinking about where is my next role, I'm still struggling with my current role and how do I show up every day?
For sure. No, it's super helpful. Thank you.
And Shannon, you did great. So give yourself a pat on the back. Sometimes holding it together is what we can do. But
Thank
our
you.
group was a more seasoned group of employees, and we can tell you that it does get better. And so our experience was a little different because we know who we are and we're good with that. And so that's a different season, but I remember when I was in your shoes and we talked a little bit about, I had another friend at work and we said, there's no telling how far we could go up the corporate ladder if we had a wife at home taking care of everything.
Exactly right. Alice, I've heard that a lot, as you can imagine. What I need is a really good wife. Well, and here, Alice, if I may add on a little bit to what you said, is, you know, when we reach a certain, here's what I find, and I'm going to be broad and generic, but sort of by decade as we move through our careers. In our 20s, we feel like we can do anything. And we're kind of, you know, we're being assertive. We're saying, I can do that. We're saying, give me that, all those kinds of things. And what we oftentimes as more seasoned leaders do is try to smooth off some of those edges and say, not so fast, or just hold on, or, you know, you're not ready or whatever. Then we get into our 30s, and this is the decade of trying to juggle and balance life, because I'm starting a family. I've got aging parents. I've got responsibilities and a team to work with and clients that are, you know, demanding a lot of me. And then we get into our 40s, and this is I've worked 20 years, I'm going to work another 20 years. Do I want the second 20 to look like the first 20? And women are making, you know, different choices when it comes to those times in our lives. And then we get into our 50s and 60s, and we want to give back. And I find that women who want to give back fall into two categories. One of them is the listen up, here's what you need to do, and I'm telling you. And then there are others who are actually doing the mentoring and the coaching, which is more about guidance and possibilities versus telling that you should do X or you should do Y. And admittedly, there are still some of the same issues in the work world today that there were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but there's a whole lot more opportunity these days than there's ever been before. And we need to make sure we're helping someone, again, to achieve their definition of success, not our definition of success. So any other thoughts? Can we get one more comment from going through the process and having the conversation?
I thought it was super helpful. I'm Lindsay Carroll. I also just seeing the sheer number of people that are you know, joining this session shows that we're all kind of in the same boat. in my breakout session, I felt like my boss had forwarded me this invite, and it was a little last minute. He sent it out on Friday and I joined. But I didn't even realize that I needed it, but it's been really helpful. And I think it's nice to see that so many other people are, I don't know, we were talking about the Corona coaster, how you kind of get these highs and lows during COVID times. And I think it's just important to kind of take a step back and make sure that, you're not just upset because of the situation that we're all in, because it's hard. But yeah, I really enjoyed the questions. They definitely are thought-provoking. They make you think, and I think the self-reflection is going to be something that we think about probably over the next couple days and weeks, and not just in this 1 hour and a half. So if you don't know all the answers now, I feel like that's fine. They're going to come to you eventually.
Yeah.
So thank
Lindsay,
you.
yeah, thank you for that. And I often hear, no matter what it is I'm talking about, but if I'm with a group of women, it's like, this came at exactly the right time. Right? And we don't know what's coming up in our futures. And that's why we've got to be prepared for whatever it might look like. But there are 2 points, and I'll round us out because we're coming to an end. But there's 2 things that I'll leave you with. This idea of slow down to speed up. And what I mean by that, I was told this in the early 90s when I went to an executive assessment center where they used to send people to say, can you be an executive or not? They put you through this battery of tests and experiences and so on. And back in those days, there weren't very many women who were in senior level roles. And so I was one of the first women that had been through this. And it was a pretty big and known organization that was putting this on. And they told me to slow down to speed up. And I said, that makes no sense to me whatsoever. You don't know my life. I have a child, I'm working, I'm traveling, I'm doing all those things. And yet, as the learner that I am, I took it to heart. And what I found out is that when I did slow down and I got really clear about what I wanted to get done, where I needed to put my energy and my focus and my attention, what I needed to prioritize, it wasn't just knocking off the 32 things on my to-do list. There were probably 5 things on there that were really important that I needed to work on and put most of my attention on that, maybe delegate the rest. And I did get more thoughtful and intentional about things. And so today's hour and a half was a time to slow down, to think about ourselves. And that leads me to my last point, which really is one of self-care. If you don't take care of yourself, you're not available to take care of everybody else. And Susan Buse is a part of why I'm here today, she's the person who introduced me to this organization. And she and I have a friend in common, and her name is Dottie Gandy, and she happens to be my co-author on the book that we wrote called Choose: The Role That Choice Plays in Shaping Women's Lives. And one of our messages there was, know the difference between self and selfish. This idea of, because I want to take care of myself, because I put myself back on my personal to-do list, because I know that I've got to replenish. And, if we just give and give and give and give, pretty soon we're empty. And that's when our health suffers, our relationships suffer, we get burnout. And so in times like we're going through right now, that self-care is extremely important. So I offer that to you as a slow down, get clear, take care of yourself. And that's going to help you ride out and get through this in a healthier way, emotionally, psychologically, mentally, physically, all of that. So thank you very much for the opportunity here to talk with you today. And I told Wanda and Cheryl that I'll stay on. If some of you have specific questions that you'd like to pursue a little further, I'm happy to do that. So I'll be here for you.
Well, great. Thank you, Marsha. And we are right on time. And I'd like to thank you for this very engaging presentation. What a great opportunity to think about our career and how and where we want to take our careers, or to mentor others in theirs. Before we go, I have 2 notes. I would like to mention that the Women in Tolling is hosting a holiday soiree, part of our self-care as a group of ladies in our program. We'd like to get together. We'll be joined by a friendly mixologist, Erin Ramp, play holiday trivia for prizes, and have our final social party of the year. We hope you'll join us, and you can head to the ibtta.org/events to get more details and to register, and we hope to see you there. And also, you're going to receive a survey this afternoon. Please help us improve future events by completing the survey. It's very short, and your input is extremely important. Please stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see you very soon. And thank you for your attendance.